Jesus Christ. Welcome to Driftwood Guitars. My name is Chris. Behind the camera is Matt, as always. And let's start off by addressing the elephant in the room, which is this beautiful mane of hair that I've got going on. I'm growing it out. I asked Matt if I should do something with it. He said, you know what, just leave it. So that's what we're doing. It's a continuity error from the last episode. Yeah, that tells you how long it's been, right? So what we did in the last episode was we glued on the fretboard. We went about making it and getting it on the neck, and now it's kind of ready for its finishing touches before we can go about shaping it. So what is left is the headstock overlay right here, as well as what I usually call my backstrapping, which is something that not everybody does, but I started doing, God, probably a decade ago, and it works out really great. To show you an example of what it is that we're doing, on a finished neck, this is what I like the back of my headstocks to look like. So what we do is we carve out a section, like you can see on this one, with a little bit of a low spot so that we can bend a piece of wood to fit that curvature. Which seems weird, but once you start carving the neck and you peel all of this away, that low spot goes away and it turns into this super smooth look. And the reason that we do that is so that, as you can see from the side here, this whole headstock to neck transition area is sandwiched between two pieces of wood. We've also got the carbon fiber reinforcements in here, and what it does is it makes so this whole headstock does not pull a Gibson and just snap off on you, and it just is super, super strong. Plus, I really like how it visually ties in the back and sides of the guitar with the back of the headstock, and it just looks super, super nice. So that's what we're going to do today. So the first thing that we need to do is get a piece of this African blackwood, which I know is not the same species as the back and sides on that guitar, but it looks absolutely identical, so we're just going to use it. We need to bend up that one little section to match this area right here and get it glued on. So that's what we're going to do first. Okay, so we've got that nice and bent up. As you can see here, African blackwood just bends up super easy. A lot of oil in this wood, and it makes it so that it bends nice and easy. And what's really cool is that let's see if Matt can get this on camera, right? Are we getting that?
Yeah.
So the bend that I put in this piece of wood is a little bit tighter of a radius than the actual curve on the back of here. I prefer it to be a little bit overbent than underbent. By the time we clamp it on there, the tighter bend makes it so that I get a better joint. Now, before we glue it on, the last thing that I need to do is get this whole area smoothed out. I don't know if it's coming out on camera, but remember, we did this on the CNC machine, and when it comes off, sometimes we do have some slight issues with tooling marks, and we have that going on in here. So I need to just clean this all off with a scraper, get this transition smoothed out so that we don't have any gaps in our glue joint. So pop this thing in the vise, scrape that off, get it cleaned up, and then we can get to gluing. Okay, and I think that is going to get us done there. I just used one of these ultimate scrapers. It did the job. You can do it with like a DA sander or something like that. The main thing is you want to be very careful that you don't add any sort of curvature to this. You want to keep it perfectly flat. That's why I do recommend some sort of scraper or sandpaper glued to a wooden block works really well. So the next thing we need to do is just get this thing epoxied on here. As I preach in all of our videos, you want to make sure that you do a dry run on this first. So off camera, Matt and I are messing around with my clamp ups. I've got this on here. We're actually going to use a rattle can and clamp that to it as well to get me my radius. I had previously taken...
Follow for more tips.
Exactly. I had previously taken a piece of wood and put a radius on it, but I had another guitar a while ago with a different size radius, so this no longer works as my clamping call right here. So we're working around it.
Yeah.
Sure, it's frowned upon by OSHA.
Yeah, please don't tag OSHA.
I am going to use epoxy to do this glue up. You could use wood glue. The issue with wood glue is that you don't want to end up with a witness line around the edge of this when we scrape all of this off. And by using just any sort of standard wood glue, you can end up with like a white line right there. So by using epoxy, it's way stronger, but it dries clear, which is really nice. So that's why we're going to use epoxy. I'm using the 15-minute. I don't dare risk using anything faster than this. I could possibly get away with a 5-minute epoxy, but that's going to make it so that I'm like, go, 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 go. And we don't want to do that. So 15-minute epoxy it is. Okay, we got this mixed up. Just going to put it on here. We don't want to go absolutely nuts with it. Ooh, Matt picked these up. We'll put a link in the description, but these are like from Amazon. Thanks, Jeff Bezos. But yeah, use these are little squeegees, and the faces on them are replaceable. They work so good for situations like this where you're trying to get a really nice even spread of your epoxy. Yeah. Okay. Trick is lining up. You want to line up the radius on this thing like right at the apex of the bend, and then making sure that it's like going on straight, because obviously this is way oversized at this point. Okay, so the first clamp, I'm going to go all the way out to the end here. And just got to be nice and easy with your first few clamps so that you don't slide this thing around all over the place. Let's see here, see if we can do this. Just making sure nothing's shifting. Yeah, that's good. That's what you want on your first clamp, is just to get it so that it doesn't move. I'm not putting full pressure on it yet either. We're just going to ease into full pressure. Look away, OSHA. We're going to need different clamps.
It is bending the shit out of the top.
Yeah, that might not work. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to try something else. This is a good example of why you don't want to use too quick of a glue. We did do dry tests on this, but if you use too quick of a glue on here, you won't have time to like come up with a plan B on if you have an issue with your clamps. So yeah, I'm gonna let the wood itself be my caul, which seems to be working really well. I'm not having any issues with the issue with not using a caul is that you would have like clamp spots, in your glue, but this is going on nice and smoothly. So I'm gonna put one on the back here just to get some good squeeze out on the back side. It's all very professional. So we got good squeeze out going on inside here, which is what I'm always shooting for. I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but good squeeze out across the whole radius. And then all I'm doing is just checking to make sure we're getting really good squeeze out across this whole thing. You don't want it to be, so much glue on there that it's just dripping everywhere, but it looks really good to me. So I think that's good. We'll let that dry for about 15 minutes while we move on to the headstock overlay. So we'll go do that now. All right, so over at the CNC machine, I have our head plate blank, double-sided tape down to the spoil board. And as you can see on my computer screen here, we are using what's called VCarve Pro, which we've talked about a little bit on this channel. But as you can see here, it's going to cut out the D pocket for the logo, and then it's going to do our Abalone trim around the outside, and then cut out the whole thing so that when we pop it off of here, all I have to do is put the Abalone logo in, and then the Abalone trim, bind it up, and then we can stick it on the neck. So we're just going to let it rip, and you guys will get to listen to some music and watch this in slow-mo. So she's been cut out. We can go ahead and pull that part off and then pop off the actual overlay. And I'll show you guys what we've got here. I hope the lighting catches all this, but you can see that we have a small ledge here, right? You can see that? Mm-hmm. And that's what our Abalone binding is going to pop onto, and obviously that's where my logo is going to go. So we'll go do that real quick, show you how we go about doing that. All right, now that we've gotten that over here, the first thing that we'll do is put my logo inside of there. I also obviously cut these out on the CNC machine as well, which just makes it super nice that everything just kind of goes right where it needs to go. So we'll go about getting that in. It's a tight fit. to get the D in. So what I like to do, you could try to hit this with a hammer and get it to go on, but it's going to crack all to bits. So what I do is I get it right on top of where I need it to go. Very, very carefully set something on top. And through the magic of editing, it looks like I got that in on the first try, but it broke into a bunch of pieces when I did that. So we've got it in now, sitting in there perfectly. What I'll do now is I'll flood it with some number 10. Not crazy. We don't want to have a bunch of cleanup to do here, but just some number 10 down in there, and that's about it. You can spray this with a little bit of accelerant if you want. There we go. You don't want to get too much on it so that you don't get it to turn white on you, because otherwise, if it does that, then it can be sometimes visible. So just a little bit of accelerant. So let me, we'll just keep moving on with our lives instead of trying to clean that up. What we need to do now, if you are doing a headstock like this and you don't want to do abalone trim around it or any binding on it, at this point, you know, you just glue it onto the guitar. But with abalone binding as well as maple binding, we need to do that now. For years, I thought that you had to do like the binding on the headstock, kind of like you do on the guitar after you've glued the headstock on. That's when you do it. But I watched some luthiers who knew way better than me at the time, and they all did it beforehand, and that's when I was like, aha, now I get it. And it makes a lot more sense this way. As always in our videos, we use this advanced shell technology, straight abalone strips. These are the same people that make the Zip Flex, the bendable abalone shell. We'll make sure we get a link in the description as well. But this stuff is just, I just love this stuff. This is the 47 thousandths, so it's like their second to narrowest stuff, and it just works super, super good. So what we'll do is get this put onto that ledge that we made on the CNC machine, because it's cut, as you can see, like to the exact same depth and width as the abalone. I'll show you how I go about doing it and how I can kind of, by doing the technique that I do, I almost don't have to do any miters at all. We'll switch over to a little bit more gelatinous super glue, number 20 if you're using the StewMac stuff. Get it down inside that pocket, nice and easy. Let me get something with a little more color on it. And what I like to do on this first one is I just go just like that. Nothing crazy. I'll hit it with some accelerant. Press on it again, and bada bing, we're good to go. Next thing we'll do is we'll start working on getting these side pieces in, and I'll get that. So that joint there has got a little gap in it, so I'm actually gonna clean that up. You could do a 45 there if you wanted to, or very slightly less than a 45. But honestly, the way that this abalone works, you can't really see the joints once it's all in. It's designed that way, so I don't even mess with it. All right, so I'll just take a little bit of sandpaper here, put just the ever so slight, it's about like a 2-degree angle on that headstock, just to get it so that we get a tighter joint on it. There we go. And once this whole thing's bound up and going, you won't be able to see the joint. So we'll get some number 20 on here. And I'm gonna go down to the point where the other angle kicks in. You can see right here where it starts to bend in. I'm gonna go to there and stop as I super glue the headstock overlay to the workbench. Let's see, there we go. Right, yeah. We'll do the other side. I know it looks crazy right now, but trust me on this one. Slight angle on that. And then we're gonna clean up all this extra here in just a second so it won't look so crazy. I'm doing a new style of headstock for some of my solid headstock guitars, and it has curves on it, and man, does that add a whole nother layer of complexity when it comes to doing the abalone trim on it. Well, that just broke off. All right, so what we've got now is the bulk of it bound in abalone. We obviously have some stuff here that needs to come off, and these pieces down here have not kicked in. So what I'm gonna do first is we'll get these two pieces level. I'm just taking, this is some 120 grit, and I'm just gonna come on here. Be very careful not to break it. If you break it, it can break where you don't want it to. I got lucky on that piece that just broke, but using sandpaper is a little bit easier. There's that, just across the top for fun. Sweet, that looks good. And so here's the thing that I do down here. This is just what I have learned that works for me. Instead of trying to cut it and get a good joint here, what I can actually do is just take this and I'll rotate it, and it snaps that pearl for me. And then I can push in on it, and once I sand down on this whole thing, that whole bend becomes invisible, just like the other one. And we can do the same thing here as well, where it bends and comes around. You see, especially on that one, you can see like it's perfect. It's right inside the pearl, and the purple. And then when I sand this here in a second, it'll all go away. But I'll break that piece off, just give it a little gap there, and then fish some of my super glue down in there, and then get that to go back to where I want it. Right there. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. I know this seems like super imprecise, but it's the nature of this abalone. You just can't see any of the joints inside, any of the gaps in any of the pieces, so it just makes it easier to just go a little crazy with it. All right, so these last little pieces here, I'm just gonna grab a couple of pieces that are a little longer. We'll put some 20 there. Put a piece right there. Looks good, feels good. We'll do the same thing here. I am trying to make sure I'm getting pieces that match pretty decently, but it doesn't have to be perfect. A little bit there. All right, so now that we've gotten all that in, I'm just gonna very gently cut these. And I'm gonna cut them proud so that they're sticking out a little bit, and then do the rest with the sandpaper. Take this over to here. Not a lot of pressure on the sandpaper, otherwise you'll break it. And then I'm gonna hit all those edges again, just to get everything perfectly level with the sides. Yeah, man. And then as you can see, our pearl is just sitting really nice and pretty on there.
Nice.
Yeah. The last thing that we need to do before we can actually glue this to the guitar is to do our maple binding around the outside. So I'm gonna go grab that. We'll get the maple glued on and show you how we go about doing that. It's a little bit more complex than the abalone, but it doesn't take super long. And to me, it's totally worth it because it just looks really nice. All right, so I've grabbed a piece of my the maple that we used on the body of the guitar, which this is just it's such a killer set of maple that we got. Just the craziest figure on it. Looks super nice. And I've cut off two pieces. One piece that is longer than the width of the headstock, and then one piece that is longer than the length of the headstock. And you might wonder, where's this piece? But what I like to do is actually split these down the middle, because this is so much thicker than the actual headstock itself is. You can actually take a razor blade, and with a bunch of passes you can come in here and get this thing to split down the middle, which makes this job a lot easier. So I just need to cut this in half real quick. There we go. Whew. All right, sweet. So what we end up with there obviously is a perfect matching piece of wood, which is awesome, but also it's not now like way thicker than the rest of the headstock. So it's just a way to kind of get more wood out of it. You can actually sometimes, we'll see if we can get away with it here. Sometimes you can get away with it with a pair of just wire cutters, and you can kind of, and then meet it down the middle with a razor blade. Like that. Boom. And there we go. So now we've got our headstock piece there. Okay, so what I need to do at this point is just miter these, because obviously we don't want to do butt joints like we did with the pearl, because the pearl hides it, the maple does not. So I need to put, it's roughly a 45-degree angle. Obviously that kicks in a little bit, so it's probably about a 46, 47-degree angle that we need to put on that wood. I usually do it over there on my edge sander. Not everybody has one of those, so I think actually what I'll do in this particular case is show you guys how I do it with my chisel instead. So let me grab a chisel. What I'm gonna do first is I always like to get the top piece on first. It's just easier to get the miters perfect on that piece, and then we can use these two to align to it. So what I like to do is to get it right up where I want. I'm having to do this upside down and backwards. I sharpen a one tip of a mechanical pencil, and then I use that to mark the outside edges of this. Then what I can do, so we've got our marks here, is I take my chisel, a nice sharp chisel, and we're gonna work ourselves over to that pencil line. You guys can't see it necessarily, But what I want to see if Matt can try to get on camera here is what I use, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, is you can use the reflection on the back of your chisel to tell whether or not you've got a good angle or not. So by putting it on here, can you get that at all, Matt?
Yeah, kind of.
So what you do is you move it around until you get yourself a nice 90-degree angle look to it. Is that showing up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to use as my guide here until I walk myself up to that line, that pencil line that we've put on it. And you notice I didn't just go for it out of the gate. You don't want to just try to cut to that line first try because it's going to end poorly. Even if you have a super sharp chisel like this one, it won't do it. So by walking up to it, you can see we've gotten rid of our pencil line. But I went right to it, so now I can flip it and we can do the exact same thing. I'll actually do it the opposite direction this time so you guys can see a little better. You can't see my reflection, but we're getting there. Right, all right, so that's the pencil line right there. So this is the one that counts. Boom. And so what we should do at this point, we should be able to come over here, and it should be exactly, this is like, I'm challenging Matt with the camera work here. And so that's exactly what we want. I'm just double checking to make sure I'm happy with where it's at. So what we can do now on the side pieces is we don't have to be nearly as precise with that. We just have to get one good bevel end on it, one miter joint, should I say, and it should line up nicely. Yep. So what I do at this point is I'm going to check and make sure these two, the longer pieces, are the ones that I can change the angle on to get the good miters on. So I'm going to get this where I want it to go, and then I'm going to press this up against it and make sure that we have ourselves a nice tight miter joint. We'll check the other side, and this is all just dry testing at this point. Is that picking up on camera that close? I'm pretty surprised. Oh, look at it. Look at it. First try. I feel like we've done this on camera before. Oh, it's when we were showing everybody how we did the binding on the fretboard. Yeah. So this is very similar to that. Yeah. I'm like, man, the whole time I'm doing this, like, I feel like we've done this before.
Deja vu? Yeah.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to use binding tape and get this glued on. Let me pull the neck out of here real quick. It is dry, so I might as well just go ahead and yank that off real quick and set it aside. Okay, so I'm going to use my vise here, get this in here, and just like when we did the fretboard, for those of you following along at home, we want to make sure that before we glue this on that it's kind of smack in between the thickness of this. We want to have overhang on the front and the back of it so that we have room to sand when we're done. So what I like to do is just use this this LMI wood glue. It works super good. You could, if you wanted to, do this with super glue, but super glue is brittle, man. And with this being the edges of the instrument, if somebody were to bang a guitar into a wall or something, my fear is that because super glue is brittle that you could actually pop your binding off. That's my thought process why I don't use super glue on this part. So this first one is crucial. You just got to get your miters exactly on the edge. I'm blocking Matt from the shot, and I'm going to get right down the middle here. First one is just to hold it in place as we check. So it shifted that way on me, so we just need to make sure we move it this way. I'm actually going to show another way to do this so you can ensure that you get it right, is lining up the miter on one side like that. And then pressing down with your tape. And then you'll double check before you really get the clamping that it's right where you want it. A little more tape. Before we move on, just double checking that we are getting overhangs on both sides, on the front and the back. That looks good. Switch it over to its side. I need a little more over here. Yes. We'll do some glue across. I'm going to do glue on the whole thing. Nothing crazy. You don't want to have so much squeeze out that you got to spend forever cleaning it up.
I guess that maple will make that bend right there.
It will. Don't tell him to lead, man. No. Yeah, I will though. It'll go around the bend. Sorry. So I like to do it where I'm not covering up the miter joint when I'm putting the tape on, just so that I can make sure that we're getting a good no gaps or anything there. I'm gonna go right to the end of right before the break happens, right here. Then what I like to do is basically break it. You hear just a tiny little crack right there. Put it back in here. And we're gonna make that look really nice. It's gonna be slightly rounded right now because of the crack that I put in there. But once this comes out of the glue up, we can tighten all that back up again with some sandpaper, and there'll be no joint. You won't see any sort of crack or anything on that. It's just way easier than trying to do a miter joint. Flip it, some glue, rinse and repeat. And we'll do the same thing here, where we just break it. And that side didn't really want to break, which is fine. So we will just bend it down with the tape. Okay, everything's in. While it's still got a little bit of play to it, I'm just going to check and make sure that we're getting, that it's, once again, sticking out a little proud on both sides. And we'll let that sit for about 40 minutes and run it through the drum sander, and it'll be ready to glue onto the guitar. Okay, we've got the glue dry, kind of. We had lunch. I had pizza. Matt had some curry, and here we are. I'm just going to pull this off so we can see what she looks like, run it through the sander, and get this thing glued on. I'm excited. This is like the exciting part, right? You do all that work, you pull the tape off, and it actually looks really nice.
Smoke them if you got them.
Smoke them if you got them. See, she's looking really nice at this point. Obviously, we've got shmoo here and shmoo around the edges that we need to get rid of. What I like to do is actually get this so that it's perfectly flat on the back. Get rid of the maple from being proud. Get this flat, and then I'll run it through the drum sander so that as we come through that, it'll come out and be absolutely perfectly flat, and you'll see what the finished result looks like. It's always a bit risky with the highly figured maple that you don't get a bunch of tear out using the hand plane, but we're just taking little nibbles. All right, so what I'm gonna do is we'll run over to the drum sander real quick and get this nice and flat. If you don't have a drum sander and you're doing all your binding and everything like this, what I would probably recommend is that you get the one side flat like we have here, double-sided tape this thing down to your workbench, and then either use a piece of wood with sandpaper on it or your DA sander to try to get this as smooth as possible at this point. But thank God we don't have to do that. Fresh off the drum sander, you can see how super cool this looks, right? It looks super good. I'm really, really happy with how that came out. Some of you might be wondering, like, why have you not done your tuning machine holes or even the slots, since this is going to be a slotted head? I could do that at this point if I wanted to, or have done it on the CNC machine, but I actually do it a little bit later in the process, and we'll get to that, cross that bridge when we get to it, but I like to do it after the fact. So the only thing that's left to do on this is to glue this to the headstock. You can see the backstrap that we've put on the headstock of this guitar is a little bit oversized, which is totally fine. But right before I glue this on, I'm just gonna lop off the extra material there. It's easier to make it way oversized than just remove material before or after it's glued on. So that's what I like to do. But yeah, let me cut this off and we'll glue that on there and wrap this turkey in some foil, man. Okay, we're not going to worry about getting that absolutely perfect at this point. That's going to happen after we get that glued on. But everything looks really nice right now. I'm happy with where everything's at. The next thing that we need to do is get this thing glued on. One thing that I did off of camera that I did want to mention was I did put a 15-degree angle on the leading edge of this headstock overlay so that when it goes on there, we have a nice spot for our nut to go. So something to think about. If you want to do it the way Martin does it on some of their guitars, you would leave that as a 90-degree and angle the nut. So it's just something to think about before you glue that on. But you can see how perfectly this thing is looking, right? It just wants to sit on there absolutely flush, really, really nicely. And that's because we're using the CNC machine. If you're not using CNC, the best way to go about doing this, it would be to keep your headstock a little bit bigger than you need it to be, glue your headstock overlay on, and then bring your headstock to match the same size as that. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of confusion that might be there. What I like to do sometimes is to put a nut blank inside of here as I glue this on, just so that I know that I have it exactly where I want it. I actually just grabbed a spare nut that I had off of an old Breedlove. As long as it's going to be the same width as what the nut that you're going to be using on your guitar, it's totally fine. For the face of the headstock, you can get away with just using wood glue, and that's what we are going to use here. We don't want to get too crazy with it. I'll spread that out here in a second. I like to put her in the vise. If you have your tuning peg holes already drilled, you could use those as alignment pins if you'd like. There's a lot of different ways you can go about doing this to keep it from sliding around. I'm going to do it the stubborn way and not have any alignment pins whatsoever and just chase after my own tail.
Because this video is not so instructional, it's more cautionary.
Exactly.
There's two ways to teach.
This is a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's funny, like a lot of times in these YouTube videos, I do things a little bit differently than I do like when I'm not on camera. And yeah, I would probably be using alignment pins, but it's too late now. All right, and so instead of having alignment pins, what I'll use is some binding tape. And we're gonna use that to kind of get this headstock to live right where I want it to, so it doesn't slide around once we do apply clamping pressure to it. That looks and feels really good to me. Before I put clamping pressure on, I want to make sure that I've got a really nice tight joint on the nut here. Once again, the nut is just acting as a spacer for us at this point. I want to make sure that I don't have any overhang, and if I do, it's ever so slight and that it's nice and even around the whole guitar. The headstock, I always make a little oversized in this direction, so it is good to go. So now all I got to do is clamp this bad boy down. Just get yourself something nice and flat as a clamping caul to put on top of here. I like to get it just about to where the nut is, but I don't actually get it butted up against it because I want to make sure that I can still see, make sure that we don't have any gaps inside of there. Then we are just going to start applying some pressure. You're going to feel a slight pressure. All right, and now I'm going to check my work. Put one more clamp on it, man. And that is it. And dismount at that point. Everything looks really good. The judges give it.
Landing.
Yeah. We will reveal to you how this looks in the next episode, but that kind of gets us through the last of the major construction on the neck of the guitar. The only thing else that we need to add is the heel cap to the back of the neck, but in the next episode, we're actually going to go about carving this thing, or at least showing you guys how I go about doing it. Yeah, let us know if you guys think that anything I did was absolutely ridiculous, if you have better ways to do them, but I hope you guys learned something in this and can apply them to your build, and I promise you, we're going to get the next episode out very, very soon for you. So make sure you do like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.